Rita Hollis hated space stations. Too many tight corridors, too much recycled air, and way too many species packed into one place who all thought their way of doing things was the only right way. But here she was, stuck on Harmony Point for what the diplomats called critical trade negotiations. She called it a waste of time. The former colony marshal adjusted her uniform and looked down at the scruffy dog sitting beside her. Biscuit was getting old, gray around the muzzle, and had a habit of drooling when he was nervous. Right now, a thin line of drool was making its way toward the polished floor. "You and me both, buddy," Rita muttered. The main assembly hall stretched out before them, filled with delegates from 40 different species. The air smelled like a combination of perfume, sulfur, and something that reminded Rita of burnt plastic. She had been through worse. 2 tours on the outer colonies taught her that most conflicts could be handled with a level head and a firm hand. The dog helped too. Biscuit had pulled her through some dark times after the war, and a reptilian diplomat passed by and gave Biscuit a look of pure disgust. Rita had heard it all during the security briefing. Most species thought dogs were primitive, just animals that humans kept around for sentiment. The council had argued for an hour about whether Biscuit could even be allowed on the station. Medical support animal, Rita had told them flatly. He goes where I go. They had given in, mostly because humanity was new to the council and nobody wanted to start a diplomatic incident over a dog. Rita knew they were just being polite. She could feel the stares, hear the whispered comments in languages her translator chip couldn't quite catch. Across the hall, a commotion started near the main entrance. The crowd parted like water, and Rita felt her hand instinctively move toward her sidearm. Then she saw why everyone was moving. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters tall at the shoulder, covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. 6 legs moved with predatory grace, and its head was all teeth and ridged bone. 2 eyes, burning yellow, scanned the crowd with obvious intelligence. This was a Ravenclaw, and even Rita, who had faced down plenty of dangerous fauna, felt her mouth go dry. Behind the beast walked Prince Daleth of the Valthrine Empire. He was tall for his species, his scales a deep crimson that marked him as royal blood. He wore minimal armor, just enough to show his rank, and his expression was carved from stone. The Valthrine were warrior people, and their princes were expected to bond with the most dangerous predators in their home system. The Ravenclaw was proof of status, power, and control. Rita had read the briefing files. The bond between a Valthrine royal and their Ravenclaw was supposed to be absolute. Psychic, unbreakable, formed through ritual combat when the prince was barely old enough to hold a weapon. The beast would die for its master, kill for its master, and never show submission to anyone else. The procession moved through the hall in silence. Even the most arrogant delegates stepped back. The Ravenclaw's claws clicked on the metal floor, a sound that seemed too loud in the sudden quiet. Biscuit, who had been half asleep, suddenly lifted his head. His tail gave a small wag. "No, Rita whispered. Don't even think about it." But Biscuit was already on his feet, pulling against the leash with surprising strength for an old dog. Rita tightened her grip, but the dog was focused on something. His tail wagged harder. The Ravenclaw stopped walking. Prince Daleth turned to his beast, clearly surprised. The psychic bond between them was visible in the way the prince's hand moved, a gesture that should have brought the creature back in line. But the Ravenclaw's head was turning, nostrils flaring. It had caught a scent. The hall went from quiet to dead silent. Rita felt every eye turned toward her section of the room. The Ravenclaw's massive head swung in their direction, those yellow eyes locking onto something. Onto Biscuit. "Security," someone said over the station's communication system. The word was calm but urgent. The Ravenclaw took a step forward. Then another. Prince Daleth was speaking rapidly in his own language, his hand gestures becoming more insistent. The psychic bond should have stopped the beast immediately. That was the entire point of the ritual, the foundation of Valthrine power. But the creature kept moving. Rita pulled Biscuit back, her training kicking in. She calculated distances, exits, the location of her weapon. The dog would never survive a direct attack. Neither would she, probably, but she would go down fighting if it came to that. The Ravenclaw began to move faster. Its 6 legs carried it across the hall with terrible speed. Delegates scattered, some screaming, others frozen in shock. Rita saw security personnel reaching for weapons they probably should not fire in a crowded diplomatic assembly. "Get down," Rita ordered, pushing Biscuit behind her legs. The beast covered the distance in seconds. It was right there, close enough that Rita could smell its breath, could see every ridge on its scaled hide. She pulled her sidearm, knowing it was useless, but refusing to die without trying. Then the Ravenclaw did something impossible. It stopped. Inches from Rita, close enough to strike, the massive predator simply stopped. Its head lowered slowly until that terrible face was level with Biscuit. The yellow eyes fixed on the old dog. And then, with the entire Galactic Council watching in stunned disbelief, the deadliest creature in the Valthrine home system bowed its head and dropped to its belly in a gesture of complete submission. The Biscuit's tail wagged happily. He pulled free from Rita's grip and walked forward, sniffing the Ravenclaw's nose with the friendly curiosity of a dog who had never met a creature he did not want to be friends with. The silence in the hall was absolute. Prince Daleth stood frozen, his hands still raised in a command his beast had ignored. His face showed shock, then confusion, then something that looked almost like horror. Rita stared at her dog, who was now licking the Ravenclaw's snout while the massive predator made a sound that could only be described as a purr. "Well," Rita said to nobody in particular. "That's new." 3 hours after the incident, Rita sat in a conference room that smelled like cleaning chemicals and stress. Across from her, Prince Daleth looked like he had aged 10 years. His scales had lost some of their shine, and his hands kept clenching and unclenching on the table surface. "Explain this," he said in heavily accented standard. "Your creature did something to mine." "Biscuit didn't do anything," Rita replied. "He's just a dog that made my bonded guardian submit." The prince's voice was tight, with barely controlled emotion. "Do you understand what you have done? What this means for my people?" Rita did not, actually, but she was smart enough to know when to keep her mouth shut. The door opened, and a human woman walked in carrying data pads and wearing the expression of someone who had not slept in days. Dr. Amara Wells, xenobiologist, looked between Rita and the prince. "I have preliminary findings," Dr. Wells said, setting the pads on the table. "And I need to run more tests, but what happened in that hall was not mind control or technology." "Then what?" Prince Daleth demanded. Dr. Wells pulled up a holographic display. It showed a complex chemical structure rotating slowly in the air. "This is a pheromone marker found in Earth canines. Specifically, it is a combination of biochemicals that developed over 40,000 years of coevolution with humans." Rita blinked. "You're saying Biscuit's smell did that?" "Not just smell. It is more complicated." Dr. Wells expanded the display. "When humans first encountered wolves on Earth, something unique happened. Instead of competing, they formed a partnership. Over thousands of generations, wolves evolved into dogs. They learned to read human facial expressions, respond to human emotions, and integrate into human social groups." "I fail to see," Prince Daleth said coldly, "how this relates to my Ravenclaw." "Your Ravenclaw recognized something in Biscuit's scent profile," Dr. Wells continued. "A biochemical signature that signals pack leader and protector. Think about it. Dogs did not just live alongside humans. They lived alongside apex predators who somehow became guardians instead of threats." Rita felt something click in her mind. "You're saying other species can smell that?" "Some species, yes. Particularly predator species with strong social structures." Dr. Wells pulled up another image, this one showing a wolf and a human standing together. "Earth is what we call a death world. High gravity, extreme temperature shifts, aggressive microbiomes. Everything that evolved there had to be tough. When predators on Earth decided to partner with humans instead of fighting them, they created something the galaxy has never seen." Prince Daleth stood abruptly. "My people have bonded with Ravenclaws for 5,000 years. We use psychic rituals passed down through generations. You expect me to believe that your primitive animal has something we do not?" "Not primitive," Dr. Wells said quietly. different. Your bond is based on control. The Ravenclaw submits to your will through psychic force. But what your Ravenclaw sensed in Biscuit was not control. It was partnership. The prince's expression was difficult to read, but Rita saw something in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or curiosity, that a knock on the door interrupted them. A security officer stepped in, looking nervous. Dr. Wells? We have a situation. Some of the other delegates want to test this theory. 20 minutes later, Rita found herself in the station's cargo bay, watching a parade of creatures that would have given her nightmares. A crystalline spider thing from the outer rim. A six-armed bear creature from somewhere she could not pronounce. Even a floating jellyfish that apparently had venom that could kill in seconds. Biscuit sat beside her, completely unbothered. One by one, the handlers brought their creatures forward. Each owner insisted their beast was untamable, dangerous, impossible to control without heavy restraints or drugs. Rita just watched as each creature approached Biscuit, and each one showed some level of calm. The spider thing stopped its aggressive clicking. The bear creature lay down and made a sound like a sigh. The jellyfish actually changed colors, its threatening red fading to a peaceful blue. "This is impossible," someone muttered. "Not impossible," Dr. Wells said, taking notes on her datapad. "Just unexpected. These creatures are all predators with social structures. They recognize the markers that Biscuit carries. Markers that say this creature stands with apex predators and survives." Rita watched Biscuit sniff the jellyfish with mild interest. The old dog had no idea he was causing a galactic incident. He was just happy to meet new friends. Prince Dalet stood apart from the crowd, his arms crossed. Rita walked over to him, leaving Biscuit with Dr. Wells. "Your empire won't like this," Rita said. "No," the prince agreed. "They will see it as weakness, as proof that our methods are flawed." "Are they?" The prince turned to look at her. Up close, Rita could see the weight he carried. "I bonded with my Ravenclaw when I was 12 years old. The ritual required me to enter its den and force my will upon it through psychic combat. I nearly died, but I succeeded, and the beast has obeyed me ever since." "That doesn't sound like bonding," Rita said. "That sounds like breaking. It is the way of my people. Maybe your people have been doing it wrong." Prince Daleth's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of emotion Rita could not interpret. "You speak dangerously, human. I speak honestly." Rita looked back at Biscuit, who was now getting belly rubs from Dr. Wells. "I didn't break Biscuit. I didn't force him to be my companion. He was a rescue from shelter, already grown, already set in his ways. But we learned to trust each other. That's the difference. Trust," the prince repeated, as if the word was foreign. "Trust," Rita confirmed. "It's not weakness. It's choosing to stand together instead of forcing someone to kneel." Before the prince could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The cargo bay lights shifted to emergency red. A voice came over the communication system, speaking rapidly in multiple languages. Dr. Wells looked up from her datapad, her face going pale. "Something's wrong. All the predator species on the station are going crazy. Not just aggressive. Berserk." Rita's hand went to her sidearm. Across the cargo bay, she could hear screaming starting in the corridors outside. The crystalline spider thing began smashing against its containment field. The bear creature roared, a sound that made Rita's bones vibrate. Only Biscuit remained calm, his tail wagging slightly as he sensed Rita's tension. "What's happening?" Prince Daleth demanded. "I don't know," Dr. Wells said, fingers flying across her datapad. "But every dangerous creature on this station just became a threat." The prince's killer beast bowed the moment it caught a human dog scent. Part 3 blood marked the corridor walls in 3 different colors. Rita moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency. Biscuit pressed close to her leg, Prince Daleth covering their rear. The station's artificial gravity flickered, making their steps uncertain. "There," Dr. Wells gasped, pointing to a service entrance. "Medical bay is through there." They had been fighting their way through the station for 15 minutes, and Rita had seen things she wished she could forget. A guard beast from the crystalline sectors had torn through a bulkhead like paper. Something with too many teeth had cornered a group of delegates before station security put it down with heavy weapons. The air tasted like fear and ozone from discharged energy weapons. What bothered Rita most was how wrong it all felt. Beasts going crazy was one thing. Beasts ignoring their handlers completely, attacking even those they were bonded to. That was something else. Something deliberate. They made it to the medical bay and sealed the door behind them. Inside, wounded delegates from a dozen species were being treated by overwhelmed staff. A doctor with 4 arms was working on 3 patients at once. In the corner, Rita spotted what she was looking for. "There," she said, pointing to a display showing the station's security feed. "Let me see the cargo bay footage from right before this started." Dr. Wells pulled up the recording. They watched themselves standing there, watched the peaceful scene with Biscuit and the various creatures. Then, at the edge of the frame, something changed. The air itself seemed to shimmer. "What is that?" Prince Daleth asked the doctor. Wells enhanced the image, running it through filters. A device became visible, small and metallic, attached to the cargo bay's environmental controls. "That's a dispersal unit. Someone planted it there." "Chemical weapon?" Rita asked. "Biological, most likely. Something designed to trigger aggression in predator species." Dr. Wells pulled up more data. The timing was perfect, right when we had all those creatures gathered in one place. Someone wanted to cause maximum chaos. Prince Daleth's expression darkened. "The Purity Front." "Who?" Rita asked. "Extremists who oppose new species joining the council," the prince explained. "They have been quiet for years, but they believe that species like yours dilute galactic civilization. They would see this as a perfect opportunity to frame humans for an attack." Rita felt anger rise in her chest. "They're using the creatures as weapons. And it is working." Prince Daleth gestured to the chaos visible through the medical bay windows. "My Ravenclaw is somewhere on this station, completely out of control. It will kill everything it encounters until the drug wears off or it is destroyed." Dr. Wells was still studying her data pad, her fingers moving rapidly. "Wait, look at this. The drug's frequency is designed to override natural instincts and bonding chemicals. But there's a gap in the spectrum." "Speak plainly," Prince Daleth said. "The pheromone markers from Earth canines. The drug doesn't affect them because those markers developed independently from galactic predator biology." Dr. Wells looked up, her eyes wide. "That's why Biscuit stayed calm, and why the creatures near him showed less aggression." Rita looked down at her dog, who was sniffing a wounded delegate's hand and getting his ears scratched in return. "You're saying Biscuit can counter this drug?" "Not just Biscuit. Any Earth canine with the right pheromone profile. If we could get enough dogs near the affected creatures, we might be able to disrupt the drug's effects." "Where exactly?" Rita said slowly. "Are we going to get a bunch of dogs on a space station?" Dr. Wells smiled grimly. "You brought a ship, didn't you?" The human vessel Steady Hand was in orbit, carrying the full human delegation's security force and support staff. It took 10 minutes to get through to them on the emergency channel. The captain, a woman named Torres, listened to Rita's explanation without interrupting. "You want me to load up every dog on this ship and shuttle them down to a station full of rampaging predators?" Torres said flatly. "Yes," Rita confirmed. "Give me 15 minutes." The cargo shuttles arrived, carrying 23 dogs. Military working animals, therapy dog from the medical staff, even someone's pet who had somehow gotten approved for the voyage. They came in all sizes, from a massive shepherd mix to a 3-legged terrier named Herbert. Rita organized them like she would have organized a tactical team. Groups of 3, each with a handler, each assigned to a different section of the station. The goal was not to fight the creatures, but to calm them enough for security to regain control. "This is insane," one of the handlers said. "Probably," Rita agreed. "But it's what we've got." Prince Daleth stood apart, watching the preparations. Rita walked over to him, Biscuit at her heels. "Your Ravenclaw is in the main assembly hall," the prince said quietly. "Station security has sealed it off, but they cannot get close. It has already killed 4 people. "Then that's where we start," Rita said. The prince looked at her. "You would risk yourself for my beast? After what my people have said about yours?" "I'm not doing it for your people," Rita told him. "I'm doing it because that creature is suffering. The drug is forcing it to act against its nature. No living thing should be used like that. They moved through the station in coordinated teams. Each time a group of dogs encountered a maddened creature, the same thing happened. The animal would pause, confused, its aggression dampening. Not gone completely, but reduced enough that security could move in with nets and tranquilizers instead of lethal force. Rita's team reached the assembly hall. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the Ravenclaw. It was covered in blood, some of it its own. The massive creature paced back and forth, smashing into walls, making sounds that hurt to hear. "It's in pain," Prince Daleth said, and for the first time Rita heard real emotion in his voice. "The bond between us. I can feel it. The drug is like fire in its mind." "Then let's put out the fire," Rita said. She opened the door slowly, Biscuit walking beside her. The other dogs fanned out behind them, creating a perimeter. The Ravenclaw spun toward them, jaws opening in a roar that rattled Rita's teeth. But Biscuit just sat down and waited, like he had all the time in the world. The Ravenclaw charged. Rita forced herself to stand still, trusting Dr. Wells's theory, trusting 40,000 years of evolution. The beast covered half the distance, then slowed. Its head shook back and forth, like it was fighting something internal. The pheromones were working. Rita could see it in the way the Ravenclaw's movements became less certain, more confused. It took another step forward, then stopped completely. Prince Daleth walked past Rita, his hands empty, his scales shifting through a rainbow of colors. "Peace," he said in his own language. "I am here." The Ravenclaw's eyes focused on its bonded partner. For a moment, Rita thought the drug would win, that the beast would attack its own prince. But then the massive creature lowered its head and made a sound that was almost a whimper. "Peace," Prince Daleth repeated, reaching out to touch the scaled hide. "I am here." Around them, the other dogs moved closer, creating a circle of calm. The Ravenclaw collapsed slowly, exhausted and confused, but no longer berserk. Rita let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Through the windows, she could see similar scenes playing out across the station. Dogs and handlers, working together to pull creatures back from the edge. "Dr. Wells," Rita said into her communicator. "It's working. It's actually working." The emergency medical station smelled like antiseptic and too many bodies in too small a space. Rita watched Dr. Wells work on a wounded guard while Biscuit lay under a bench, finally resting after hours of walking through the station. Around them, delegates argued in a dozen languages. The humans brought this weapon, a crystalline ambassador insisted, its voice like breaking glass. They arrive with their animals, and suddenly our beasts go mad? This cannot be coincidence. "We saved your people," Rita said, keeping her voice level despite her exhaustion. "Our dogs stopped the attack. How convenient that you had the cure." Rita stood, ready to say something she would probably regret, but Prince Daleth beat her to it. The Valthrine prince stepped forward, his scales dark with anger. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying the weight of generations of warrior royalty. "The humans did not cause this. They saved us when they could have let us tear ourselves apart. If you cannot see the difference, then you are a fool." The crystalline ambassador recoiled. Around the room, other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Princes did not involve themselves in common disputes. That he spoke at all meant something to Dr. Wells looked up from her patient. "I've been analyzing the drug that was used. It's sophisticated, military grade, and the dispersal pattern suggests someone with deep knowledge of the station's environmental systems." "Inside job," Rita concluded. "Most likely, and they're not done." Dr. Wells pulled up a display showing the station's power grid. "There are 3 more devices planted throughout the station. Security found them an hour ago. Same design, but these are different. Not biological weapons." "What then?" Prince Daleth asked. "Explosive charges, set to detonate in the council chambers during the emergency session." Dr. Wells's expression was grim. "The Purity Front wants to wipe out the entire council leadership and blame it on the chaos." Rita felt cold. "When's the session?" 2 hours. The station's security chief, a 6-limbed creature whose name Rita could not pronounce, coordinated the evacuation. But there was a problem. The Council's rules required that emergency sessions be held during a crisis. If they canceled, it would take weeks to reconvene, and in that time the station's political situation would collapse. "We need to find who planted the devices," the security chief said. "Without knowing who is behind this, we cannot trust anyone." Rita looked at Biscuit, who had woken up and was watching her with those patient brown eyes. An idea formed in her mind. A crazy idea, but most of her good ideas started that way. "Dogs can track scents," she said. "Military and police units have used them for hundreds of years on Earth. If we can get a scent sample from one of the devices, we might be able to track whoever planted them." "You think your animal can identify a terrorist by smell?" the security chief asked. "Not Biscuit. He's too old for that kind of work. But we have trained tracking dogs on the shuttle." Rita pulled up her communicator. "Torres, I need your best tracking team. And I need them 5 minutes ago." The tracking dogs arrived with their handlers. 2 shepherds named Ace and Duke, both trained in explosive detection and pursuit. Their handler, a young man called Stevens, looked around the damaged station with wide eyes. "We're going hunting," Rita told him. "Can they do it?" Stevens knelt beside his dogs, checking their harnesses. "If there's a scent trail, they'll find it." They started at the first device location. Security had already removed the explosive, but the area still smelled like whoever had planted it. Ace sniffed the mounting bracket, his body going still with concentration. Then his tail began to wag, and he pulled at his lead. The trail led through maintenance corridors and service tunnels that most delegates never saw. Duke took point while Ace confirmed the scent at regular intervals. Rita followed with Stevens, Prince Daleth close behind. The prince had insisted on coming, and Rita had to admit he was good in a fight after what she had seen in the assembly hall. "Your dogs are trained for this," Prince Daleth observed as they walked. "Not just companions. Dogs have jobs on Earth," Rita explained. "Some are companions, sure, but others are trained for specific tasks. Search and rescue, medical support, law enforcement, military operations. We've been working together so long that we've learned to use each dog's natural talents. My Ravenclaw has only one purpose: to fight." "Maybe that's the problem." Prince Daleth looked like he wanted to argue, but Ace suddenly stopped and growled low in his throat. They had reached a section of the station marked for diplomatic offices. Specifically, the office belonging to the crystalline ambassador who had accused humans earlier. "Well," Rita said, "that's interesting." They found the ambassador in his office, destroying data pads with methodical efficiency. When he saw them, his crystalline structure flashed through several colors. Surprise, then anger, then resignation. "You should not have interfered," the ambassador said. "Humanity does not belong in the council. Your species is too dangerous, too unpredictable. You would have been blamed for the attack, expelled in disgrace. And a lot of people would have died," Rita said. "Acceptable losses. The galaxy must be protected from Death World species." The ambassador's voice carried no regret. "Your kind brings chaos. Your animals, your adaptability, your refusal to follow proper order. You are everything the council was meant to prevent." Prince Daleth stepped forward. "You speak of order while planting bombs. You speak of protection while weaponizing our bonded companions. You are not a guardian of civilization. You are a terrorist." The ambassador shifted colors again, and Rita saw him reach for something on his desk. She drew her weapon faster, the training from her colony martial days taking over. "Don't," she said simply. Station security arrived within minutes. They found evidence linking the crystalline ambassador to the Purity Front, communications with extremist cells across the galaxy, and detailed plans for attacks on human colonies. It was enough to dismantle their entire network. But as they led the ambassador away, Rita could not shake his words. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. She had heard similar things her entire career. Earth species did not fit the galactic mold. They evolved differently, thought differently, bonded differently. Maybe that was the point. The council session went forward under heavy security. Delegates who had been ready to blame humanity an hour before now watched with uncertainty as the evidence was presented. The Purity Front had manipulated their fears, used their prejudices against Earth species to cover their own crimes. Dr. Wells stood before the council and presented her findings. Earth's coevolution with companion animals has created something unique. Not a weapon, not a tool, but a bridge. Dogs carry pheromone markers that can calm aggressive predator species across a surprising range of galactic fauna. They are natural mediators. You propose what? A delegate asked. That we import Earth animals? I propose that we learn from Earth's example. Partnership instead of domination. Trust instead of control. The Valthrine bond with their raven claws through psychic force. But what if there was another way? Prince Daleth rose from his seat, and the chamber fell silent. When a Valthrine prince spoke in council, everyone listened. I request permission to study Earth's training methods, he said formally, to learn if a better bond is possible with my Ravenclaw, not as master and servant, but as partners. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. A Valthrine prince abandoning traditional methods? Unthinkable. Revolutionary. The council had no choice but to approve. The evidence was clear. Earth dogs had saved the station. Earth methods had stopped a terrorist attack. And Earth's partnership model had shown a possibility that many species had never considered. Rita watched it all with Biscuit at her feet, the old dog completely unaware that he had just changed galactic politics. He was too busy hoping someone would drop food. Rita never expected to become a teacher, but here she was, standing in a training facility on Harmony Point, watching Prince Daleth struggle with the most basic concept in dog training. No, Rita said for the 10th time. You're still using the psychic bond. I can see it in how he responds. The Ravenclaw lay before Prince Daleth, perfectly still, perfectly obedient. It looked like success. But Rita had spent 40 years around animals, and she knew the difference between obedience and partnership. He does what I ask, Prince Daleth said, frustration clear in his voice. Because you're forcing him. Watch. Rita called Biscuit over. The old dog trotted up, tail wagging. Biscuits, seed. Biscuit sat. Then he looked at Rita with an expression that clearly said, What's next? See the difference? Rita asked. Biscuit chooses to listen because we're a team. He trusts that when I ask him to do something, there's a good reason. Your Ravenclaw obeys because you leave him no choice. Prince Daleth's scales shifted color. A sign Rita had learned meant he was thinking hard. My people have done it this way for 5,000 years. And how many handlers died during the bonding ritual? The prince went very still. That is not spoken of. Maybe it should be. Rita walked over to the Ravenclaw, moving slowly. The massive creature's eyes tracked her, but it did not move. Still waiting for the prince's command. What's his name? Name. Prince Daleth looked confused. He is my Ravenclaw, my bonded beast. But what do you call him? When it's just the two of you? The prince had no answer. Rita sighed. On Earth, we name our companions. It's a sign of respect. Recognition that they're individuals, not just tools. She looked at the Ravenclaw's dark scales, the way they caught the light. How about Shadow? Strong name for a strong creature. Shadow, Prince Daleth repeated slowly. Then, to Rita's surprise, something changed in the Ravenclaw's eyes. A flicker of interest, maybe recognition. Shadow, the prince said again, this time without the psychic push. The creature's head tilted slightly, a gesture Rita recognized from hundreds of interactions with Earth animals. Curiosity. Good, Rita said. Now we're getting somewhere. Over the next week, Rita worked with Prince Daleth every day. They started with basic concepts. Positive reinforcement instead of psychic force. Rewards for good behavior. Most importantly, giving Shadow choices. What if he chooses wrong? Prince Daleth asked during one session. Then we try again, Rita said. Learning requires mistakes. If Shadow never has the chance to choose, he'll never truly understand what you're asking of him. It was slow work. 5,000 years of tradition did not change overnight. But gradually, Rita saw progress. Shadow began to respond to the prince's voice commands, not because of psychic compulsion, but because he learned what they meant. The massive predator even started to show personality. He liked having his scales scratched in a particular spot. He made different sounds for different emotions. He's playing, Prince Daleth said one day, wonder in his voice. Shadow had found a training ball, and was batting it around the facility. I've been bonded to him for 8 years, and I never knew he could play. You never gave him permission to, Rita pointed out. Word of the prince's training spread through the station. Some Valthrine delegates were scandalized. Others were curious. A few younger Valthrine arrived, asking if they could watch the sessions. Their own Ravenclaws were causing problems, they admitted. The traditional bonds were breaking more frequently. The old ways are failing, one young Valthrine woman said. Her name was Sereth, and her Ravenclaw had injured her during their bonding ritual. But we are told this is how it must be. Rita looked at the scared creature cowering behind Sereth, scales pale with stress. Bring him here tomorrow. Let's see if we can help. But not everyone approved. A formal delegation arrived from Valthrine Prime, elders who had overseen the bonding rituals for generations. They demanded an audience with Prince Daleth in the council chambers. Rita watched from the gallery as they confronted the prince. The lead elder, his scales white with age, spoke with authority that filled the room. You shame your lineage, the elder declared. The Valthrine bond is sacred. It has made us strong, made us respected, and you would trade that for the methods of a species barely qualified for council membership. Prince Daleth stood before them, and Rita saw the conflict in his posture. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. I would trade it for a partner who chooses to stand beside me, rather than a slave who has no choice. Weakness, another elder spat. No, Prince Daleth said. Strength, true strength. The strength to admit when we are wrong. The argument continued for hours. Other delegates became involved, some supporting the elders, others backing Prince Daleth. It was becoming clear that this was about more than just training methods. It was about change itself, about whether the galaxy could accept new ways of doing things. Dr. Wells found Rita in the gallery after the session ended. This is bigger than we thought, she said. I've been contacted by 17 different species asking about Earth's training methods. Some want to apply them to their own bonded creatures. Others want to establish trade for Earth animals. We're not selling dogs, Rita said firmly. I know, but we could train handlers, establish programs, share our knowledge. Dr. Wells pulled up data on her pad. Rita, we've stumbled onto something that could change how the entire galaxy approaches human-animal relationships. Or it could fall apart and we'll be blamed for disrupting galactic tradition, Rita countered. There's that too. A commotion erupted in the corridor outside. Rita heard shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting a wall. She and Dr. Wells ran toward the noise, arriving to find a scene of chaos. One of the young Valthrine who had been watching the training session stood in the corridor, his Ravenclaw between him and 3 larger Valthrine warriors. The warriors wore traditional military armor, and they were demanding the young Valthrine surrender his beast for correction. He has been corrupted by human methods, one warrior declared. The creature no longer responds to proper commands. He responds to me, the young Valthrine said, his voice shaking but determined. As a partner, not a slave. The warrior moved forward, reaching for the Ravenclaw. The creature growled, a deep sound that Rita felt in her chest. It was defending its handler, but not out of psychic compulsion. Out of choice, Rita stepped between them. Stand down. This is not your concern, human, the warrior said. It became my concern when you threatened one of my students. Rita kept her voice calm, but her hand was near her sidearm. That Ravenclaw has done nothing wrong. Neither has his handler. The human speaks truth, Prince Daleth said, arriving with Shadow at his side. The prince's own Ravenclaw moved to stand beside Rita, a clear statement of protection. These new methods work. I have seen it, felt it. My bond with Shadow is stronger now than it ever was under the old ways. The warriors hesitated. A prince's word carried weight, but tradition ran deep. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Shadow did something that changed everything. The massive Ravenclaw walked calmly over to the young Valthrine's beast and touched noses with it, a gesture of pack greeting. The younger Ravenclaw visibly relaxed, and its handler reached out to scratch its scales with obvious affection. See, Prince Daleth said softly, this is what we have been missing. Not just obedience, but connection. The warriors left, But Rita knew this was not over. Change never came easy, and they had just challenged 5,000 years of tradition. 6 months after the attack on Harmony Point, Rita stood in what used to be a cargo bay and was now officially the Companion Integration Center. The name was terrible, but the council had insisted on something formal. Rita would have preferred something like the Dog Training Room, but politics required fancy titles. Biscuit lay in his favorite spot near the window, watching ships come and go. The old dog had become something of a station mascot, though he remained completely unbothered by his fame. Right now, he was more interested in the treat that Sereth, the young Valthrine woman, was sneaking him. "You're spoiling him," Rita said without looking up from her schedule. "He deserves it," Sereth replied. Her Ravenclaw, whom she had named Echo, lay beside Biscuit in companionable silence. 6 months ago, Echo had been terrified of everything. Now he was one of the program's success stories. The door opened, and Prince Daleth entered with Shadow. The Ravenclaw had changed too. He moved with confidence now, his head high, and there was something in his eyes that Rita had never seen in the traditionally bonded beasts. Joy, maybe, or just contentment at being with a partner who respected him. "The delegation from Valthrine Prime has arrived," Prince Daleth said. "They want to see the results before they make their decision." This was it. 6 months of work, dozens of success stories, and the future of the program depended on convincing the elders that change was possible. Rita took a breath and nodded. "Let's show them what partnership looks like." The demonstration took place in the training facility. Rita had arranged for several handler beast pairs to participate, representing different species and different stages of training. The Valthrine elders sat in the observation area, their expressions carved from stone. First up was Sereth and Echo. The young woman ran through a series of commands, all given through voice and gesture, no psychic force. Echo responded with enthusiasm, clearly enjoying the work. When Sereth asked him to navigate an obstacle course, the Ravenclaw moved with precision and speed, but every few meters he would look back to check in with his handler. "That is inefficient," one elder commented. "A properly bonded beast would simply obey without confirmation." "But watch what happens when there's a choice," Rita said. She had planted a fork in the course, two paths of equal difficulty. Echo reached it and paused, looking to Sereth for guidance. The young woman gestured to the left path, and Echo took it. Then Rita activated a hidden obstacle that blocked the path. Echo stopped, assessed the situation, and made his own decision to switch to the right path instead. "He chose to override my command because the situation changed," Sereth explained. "In a real crisis, that independence could save both our lives." The elders said nothing, but Rita saw them lean forward slightly. Next came demonstrations from other species. A crystalline handler whose spider creature had learned to respond to chemical signals paired with verbal praise. A floating jellyfish that had bonded with its handler through patient trust building. Even a few non-predator species had joined the program, discovering that the principles of partnership worked across the board. But the real test came last. Prince Daleth and Shadow. The prince stood in the center of the training area, Shadow beside him. For a long moment, they simply stood together. Then Prince Daleth released the psychic bond completely, something Rita knew terrified him even after months of practice. Shadow could have done anything. Could have attacked, could have fled, could have simply walked away. Instead, the massive Ravenclaw stayed exactly where he was. "Shadow," Prince Daleth said quietly. "Hunt." It was a command every Ravenclaw knew. In traditional bonding, the beast would immediately seek out designated prey, driven by psychic compulsion. Rita watched the elders, knowing this was the moment that would decide everything. Shadow lifted his head and sniffed the air. Training drones had been released throughout the facility, carrying scent markers. The Ravenclaw identified them quickly, but instead of charging off, he looked at Prince Daleth and made a low rumbling sound. "He's asking permission," Prince Daleth explained. "Not because I force him to, but because we are partners. He trusts my judgment about when hunting is appropriate." Prince Daleth gave a hand signal. Shadow moved like liquid darkness, taking down drones with perfect efficiency. But the difference was visible. He moved with joy, with purpose that came from within rather than from external force. When the last drone fell, Shadow returned to Prince Daleth and pressed his massive head against the prince's chest, a gesture of pure affection. The head elder stood slowly. His scales were pale with age, but his eyes were sharp. You ask us to abandon 5,000 years of tradition, to admit that our ancestors were wrong. No, Prince Daleth said. I ask you to admit that our ancestors did the best they could with the knowledge they had. But we have new knowledge now. We can do better. And if we refuse, then I will continue alone, Prince Daleth said firmly. Shadow and I have chosen our path. I will not force him back into slavery to preserve tradition, even if it costs me my title. The silence stretched out. Rita found herself holding her breath. Beside her, Biscuit yawned, completely unconcerned with galactic politics. Finally, the head elder spoke. Perhaps it is time for a new tradition. The Valthrine delegation did not approve the program immediately. There were conditions, trials, political negotiations that would take months. But they did not shut it down. That alone was a victory. The elders filed out. One of them paused beside Rita. Your species is strange, human. You form bonds with creatures that should be your prey or your predators. You trust when logic says you should control. We learned a long time ago, Rita said, that the strongest bonds are built on choice. The program expanded. Within a year, the Companion Integration Center was training handlers from 20 different species. Earth dogs became the most requested resource in the galaxy, not as weapons or tools, but as teachers. They showed other species what partnership could look like. Rita eventually accepted a permanent position as director, though she insisted on keeping the program small enough to maintain quality. Biscuit retired from his unofficial duties as demonstration dog, spending his days napping in the sun and accepting treats from admirers. Prince Daleth became an advocate for reform throughout the Valthrine Empire. His success with Shadow inspired other young Valthrine to question traditional methods. It would take generations to change an entire culture, but the seeds were planted. One evening, Rita found Prince Daleth in the training facility, sitting on the floor beside Shadow. The massive Ravenclaw was sprawled on his back, getting belly rubs and making rumbling sounds of contentment. My father would be horrified, Prince Daleth said, but he was smiling. A prince of Valthrine, sitting on the floor with his beast like a common handler. Not a beast, Rita corrected. A partner. Yes, Prince Daleth agreed. A partner. Dr. Wells published her research, and it changed xenobiology across the galaxy. The concept of coevolution through partnership became a new field of study. Universities established programs. Scientists discovered that Earth's harsh conditions had not just made humans tough, but had also created opportunities for cooperation that did not exist on more hospitable worlds. The Purity Front tried one more attack 2 years later. They targeted a training facility on an outer rim station, but they had not counted on the handlers being ready or on the bonds between partners being strong enough to withstand their weapons. The attack failed, and the extremist group finally collapsed. Rita stood on the observation deck of Harmony 5 years after that first incident, watching ships from 100 worlds arrive and depart. Somewhere on the station, handlers were training with their partners. Some were using methods developed by humans. Others were adapting the principles to their own species' needs. But all of them were building relationships based on trust instead of control. Biscuit had passed away peacefully 2 years earlier, in his sleep with Rita beside him. The council had insisted on a memorial, a statue in one of the main corridors. It showed an old dog sitting calmly while a Ravenclaw bowed before him. The plaque read simply, "He taught us to choose partnership." Rita still missed him, probably always would. But his legacy lived on in every handler who learned to trust their partner, in every creature who discovered they had a choice, in every bond built on respect instead of force. Shadow found her on the observation deck, Prince Daleth trailing behind. The Ravenclaw had grown older too, his scales showing silver along the edges. But his eyes were bright, and when he saw Rita, he made that rumbling sound she had learned meant happiness. He wanted to say hello, Prince Daleth explained. He remembers Biscuit. Rita scratched Shadow's scales in that spot he liked. We all remember Biscuit. They stood together watching the ships, a human, a Valthrine prince, and a Ravenclaw who had learned that being chosen was better than being commanded. Outside, the galaxy turned, full of species learning a lesson that Earth had known for 40,000 years. The strongest bonds are the ones we choose to make.